Hello. My name is James Simons, and I'm here to speak to you about mental health. Because in 2014, I suffered a mental breakdown and was forced, thankfully, to seek help for my mental health. But what is mental health? According to mentalhealth.gov, our mental health is our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, act, and feel. It also determines how we make choices, handle stress, and relate to others. This is important to know because millions of people around the world are suffering from some form of mental illness or mental disorder. To be exact, the National Alliance on Mental Illness states that 43.8 million people will suffer some form of mental illness in a given year. The World Health Organization, whose organization is continuously fighting mental health, wrote a report stating that 450 million people around the world suffer from some form of mental illness or mental disorder. And at this point, you're probably thinking that mental health is the problem, but you'd only be half right. This report also states that even though there are treatments available, 2/3 of those people never seek help from a health professional. That is 3 out of 4 people with a known mental health disorder never find help. And that is because of the stigma, discrimination, and neglect that comes once you're labeled mentally ill. I'm very passionate about this topic because not only is it imperative, but like I said before, mental health has affected me personally. In 2014, while still serving in the United States Armed Forces, my doctor at the time diagnosed me with severe anxiety, clinical depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder. I was utterly terrified, but not of my diagnosis, but of anybody finding out, because I believed that that would label me as a failure, and I would end up killing myself. I believed that suicide was a more natural way out than living with something I was never properly educated about. I believed that I was a failure, and I believed that now I was one of those soldiers who had seen war and couldn't handle the burden that comes with it. I believed that I couldn't serve my country anymore, and the brother and sisterhood that comes from the military wouldn't accept me as one of their own anymore. I was even more terrified when I left the service back into the civilian life, because I believed that people would look at me like a weapon whose safety no longer worked. It took me months to explain to my family why I was home from the military. It took me even longer because I didn't really know what was wrong with me. It took me even longer to apply for college because I knew there I couldn't hide from people like I did when I stayed at home. But I knew that I needed to get out into the real world, and I figured if I started going to school, maybe I could figure out what was wrong with me. But it wasn't until I started school that I was given the hope to stay alive. It was the end of my first week of school Well, my English professor called me to his desk, and he told me that I was a great writer. Those words from a complete stranger filled me with so much relief. And I've never told anybody this till today, but I cried the rest of that day. God, did I cry? I cried so hard because I didn't feel like a failure anymore. And I know what I needed to do. I needed to hold on to that feeling of relief, let go of my past precipitations, and share my story with others like myself. Now, by the sound of my story, it seems like a few kind words can change a person's life, and I believe that is true. But everybody's circumstances are different. So my journey here today, I turned to the organizations and groups already fighting the good fight so that I could bring these 3 ideas to everybody here, now, or watching on what you can do to bring a positive awareness to the mental health fight. These 3 simple ideas are straightforward and are for everybody. Number 1, don't harbor self-stigma. On my journey here today, my biggest enemy was myself. I believed that the stigma around mental health made me less of a human being. I believed that my mind was unhinged somehow, that I was the failure. I fight that stigma by no longer disgracing myself. I am here, I am proud, showing everyone that a mental illness is not the end. I am a living and working productive member in this society, and I am a confident voice in my community. Enough people are suffering in silence, and no one will ever judge you more than yourself. Number 2, show compassion for those with mental illness. Webster's dictionary defines discrimination as the unjust or prejudicial treatment of a category of people or things. The very idea of someone finding out that I had an illness was more terrifying than suicide. Showing compassion for those doesn't just mean family or friends. It means showing compassion in everyone's everyday life. If you see or hear prejudicial treatment of a mental health disorder or the unjust act of a mental illness on social media, TV, or even in a conversation, speak up. Show compassion, show bravery. Because you're not just putting positivity back into the world, but you're showing others who may be listening that they are not alone. Number 3, be honest and choose empowerment over neglect. Neglect of speaking about mental health leads to a neglect of treatment. Neglect of treatment leads to 18 to 22 veterans committing suicide every day. The National Alliance on Mental Illness stated that 90% of people who commit suicide had some form or condition of mental health. No human being should ever be shunned for finding help, regardless of what it is. Mental health and mental wellness are something that should be educated about on all levels, from childhood and adolescence into adulthood. If someone opens up to you or to the world, they should be regarded as a light in the darkness. I no longer fear my illness, and I no longer fear telling people about it. I stand here now, proud and open, that a diagnosis is not the end. And enough people are suffering. And I now believe that a few kind words, sharing something positive, or even sharing my story today can help save at least one life. Thank you.